Now I'll know exactly what's happening in here.
The sheets reeked like a locker room after a marathon, mixed with something chemical that made my eyes water. I stood in the doorway of my own bedroom, duffel bag still slung over my shoulder from a week of flying some paranoid city councilman around 3 states, and tried to process what my nose was telling me. Jesus Christ, I muttered, dropping the bag with a thud that should have woken Faye. Should have, but didn't, because my wife was sprawled on the living room couch in yesterday's clothes, dead to the world at 2 in the afternoon. I'm Nick Harlan, and I've been flying helicopters for 15 years, 10 in the Army, 5 as a private contractor. I've smelled fear, cordite, and death. But this was something new, something that made my gut clench with a suspicion I didn't want to name. The bathroom told the rest of the story. Faye's phone sat on the marble counter next to a men's watch I'd never seen before. Thick, expensive, the kind worn by guys who bench press their own weight and drive cars that cost more than my annual salary. I picked up the phone. No passcode. Faye always said she had nothing to hide. The text messages made my arterial pressure spike. Can't wait for round 2 tomorrow. Bring the boys. D, you're incredible. Never had it like that before. Faye, meet at the usual place. Marco's bringing supplies. D, my hands shook as I scrolled through weeks of messages. Not just an affair, something bigger, dirtier, involving multiple people in my own home. The timestamps showed they'd been using our bed while I was working, earning money to pay for the sheets they were defiling. I set the phone down carefully, walked to my workshop, and pulled out the surveillance equipment I'd bought years ago for a security consulting side job that never materialized. Time to find out exactly what my wife had been up to. The cameras were small, professional grade, and completely invisible once installed. I placed them strategically: bedroom, living room, front entrance. If Faye wanted to play games, I'd make sure I knew all the rules. My phone buzzed with a text from Marty, my co-pilot. Emergency run tomorrow. Councilman Baird needs to be in Albany by noon. You in? Perfect timing. I texted back, absolutely. Pick me up at 6 a.m. I needed distance to think, and Faye needed rope to hang herself with. As I packed another bag, I could hear her stirring on the couch, probably wondering why I hadn't come to greet her loving wife act yet. Nick, that you, honey? Her voice carried that fake sweetness she used when she was hiding something. Yeah, just got back. Got to head out again tomorrow morning. Emergency run. She appeared in the doorway, hair messed, makeup smeared, looking guilty as hell. Oh, well, maybe we can catch up when you get back. Sure thing. I kissed her forehead, tasting stale perfume and lies. Sleep tight. That night, I lay in our guest room, watching the camera feeds on my tablet. At 11:47 p.m., Faye made a phone call. He's leaving tomorrow morning. Yes, bring everyone. We'll have the whole day. I watched 3 men enter my house the next evening while I sat in an Albany hotel room, sick to my stomach. The big one had to be Darren, moved through my home like he owned it. What I witnessed on those cameras made me understand that my marriage wasn't just over. It was war. The footage was worse than I'd imagined. Not just infidelity, humiliation. They'd use my furniture, my food, my shower. Darren Moss, according to my research, was a security consultant with a record of fraud charges that never stuck. His buddy Marco looked like a bouncer with a steroid problem and the IQ of furniture. But it was Faye's performance that really burned me. She wasn't just cheating. She was orchestrating, directing, enjoying every minute of degrading our home. In one particularly stomach-turning clip, she'd pointed to our wedding photo and laughed, while Darren made crude comments about upgrading. I sat in my workshop, cross-referencing faces with social media, building profiles. Darren drove a leased BMW, lived in a downtown penthouse he couldn't afford, and owed money to some very unpleasant people. Marco was simpler, muscle for hire with a gambling problem and a suspended license. My neighbor Gloria knocked on the workshop door around noon. Gloria was 73, lived alone, and knew everyone's business before they did. Nick, honey, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I saw some concerning activity while you were away. What kind of activity, Gloria? She handed me a manila envelope. Pictures. I was watering my plants Tuesday evening when I saw 3 men go into your house. Faye let them in, all smiles and giggles. They didn't leave until Thursday morning. The photos were grainy but clear enough. Darren, Marco, and a third man I hadn't identified yet, carrying overnight bags and cases of beer into my house like they were moving in. Gloria, you're an angel. That wife of yours is up to no good, Nick. I've seen her type before. You deserve better. That afternoon, I made my first move. Faye's car was parked in our driveway. A red Lexus I'd co-signed for, but she considered hers. I slipped a GPS tracker under the rear bumper and used my laptop to access our joint credit accounts. A few clicks later, all her cards were frozen due to suspicious activity requiring verification. My phone rang within an hour. Nick, there's something wrong with my cards. They're all being declined. Weird. Maybe identity theft? You should probably stay home until we get it sorted out. But I have plans tonight. Sorry, babe. Better safe than sorry. I hung up and watched the GPS tracker. For the next 3 hours, Faye's car didn't move. Then my phone exploded with texts from a number I didn't recognize. What did you do to Faye's cards? This is Darren. We need to talk. Don't play games you can't win. I screenshotted everything and added it to my growing file. These idiots were making this too easy. That evening I sat in Murphy's Bar, a dive near the heliport, where Marty and I often grabbed beers after long flights. The bartender, Tommy, had been there since the Carter administration and knew every piece of gossip in the city. Tommy, what do you know about a guy named Darren Moss? Tommy's face darkened. That piece of garbage? He's been running cons in this city for 5 years, calls himself a security consultant, but he's really a fixer for rich people's dirty problems. Word is he's got photos and videos of half the city council doing things their wives wouldn't appreciate. Dangerous? Only if you're stupid enough to trust him. He's got muscle, but he's not a butcher, more of a manipulator. Uses people's weaknesses against them. I bought Tommy another drink and headed home. Faye was waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed, looking like a prosecutor. We need to talk about my credit cards. What about them? Don't play dumb, Nick. I know you froze them. I sat down at our kitchen table, looking her straight in the eye. Prove it! She blinked, thrown off balance. What? Prove I froze your cards. Show me evidence. Otherwise, it sounds like you're accusing your husband of financial sabotage, which seems like a pretty serious accusation to make without proof. Faye's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She had no proof because I'd been careful to make it look like standard security protocols. The bank said there was suspicious activity. Could be anyone. Identity theft is rampant these days. I stood up and kissed her cheek. I'll call them tomorrow and see what I can do to help. That night, I watched the camera feeds again. At 2:47 a.m., Faye crept to the kitchen and made a hushed phone call. He's on to us. We need to move faster. The response was loud enough for the camera to pick up. Don't panic. Stick to the plan. We'll handle Nick. I smiled in the darkness. Let them try. The Riverside Summer Festival was perfect. Thousands of people, multiple stages, and plenty of opportunities for accidents. I'd spent the morning preparing, and now I watched Darren swagger through the crowd like he owned the place, Marco trailing behind like a loyal dog. Faye had left early, claiming she was meeting girlfriends. The GPS tracker showed her car parked 6 blocks away near Darren's building. Her credit cards were still frozen, but apparently Darren was funding her activities now. I spotted them near the main stage, Faye hanging on Darren's arm while he glad-handed local business owners. The man had no shame. Half the people he was schmoozing knew he was a con artist, but his expensive suit and confident smile opened doors anyway. Showtime, I muttered, pushing through the crowd. Marty appeared at my elbow, carrying 2 beers and grinning. You sure about this, Nick? Public humiliation isn't usually your style. Sometimes you have to adapt. I took the beer and pointed toward Darren. See the big guy in the cheap suit? That's Marco. When I give the signal, spill your beer on him. Make it look accidental. What about you? I'm going to introduce myself to Darren. I approached from behind, timing my movement with the crowd's surge toward the stage. A simple shoulder check sent Darren stumbling into a group of elderly women who shrieked as his beer splashed across their white summer dresses. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I reached out to steady him, making sure everyone could see my concerned face. Are you okay? I got pushed by the crowd. Darren spun around, his face red with embarrassment and rage. He was bigger than he looked in the photos, maybe 6'3", 220, with the kind of gym muscles that looked impressive but weren't much use in a real fight. You did that on purpose! Excuse me? I kept my voice loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. I said I was sorry. It was an accident. The elderly women were dabbing at their dresses, shooting Darren dirty looks. One of them recognized me from the local news coverage of Councilman Baird's campaigns. Aren't you Nick Harlan, the helicopter pilot? Yes, ma'am. I'm terribly sorry about this mess. She patted my arm. Not your fault, dear. Some people just can't handle their liquor. Darren's face went from red to purple. Now wait That's when Marty executed his part perfectly, accidentally, backing into Marco with a full beer. The sticky liquid soaked Marco's shirt and ran down into his pants, making him look like he'd wet himself. Jesus, watch where you're going. Sorry. Marty played the bumbling innocent perfectly. Here, let me help you clean up. He grabbed napkins from a nearby vendor and started dabbing at Marco's lap, which only made the stain worse and drew more attention. A group of teenagers started laughing and taking pictures. I turned back to Darren, who was trying to salvage the situation while his reputation crumbled in real time. Again, I'm really sorry about the accident. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime and I could make it up to you. I'm Nick Harlan, by the way. Darren's eyes narrowed. He knew exactly who I was. Yeah, maybe we should talk. Great, here's my card. I handed him a business card with my helicopter service information. Call me anytime. As I walked away, I heard one of the elderly women telling her friend, Such a nice young man, not like that rude one who spilled beer on us. Phase 1 complete. Darren now knew I existed and wasn't intimidated by him. More importantly, he'd been publicly embarrassed in front of potential clients and witnesses. My phone buzzed with a text from Faye. Where are you? Heard there was some kind of incident at the festival. I texted back. Just enjoying the music. Home later tonight. But I wasn't going home. I was going to Darren's building to see exactly how my wife's boyfriend lived. The Meridian Towers was the kind of glass and steel monument to excess that screamed new money. Darren's penthouse was on the 20th floor, according to the building directory. The parking garage was underground, poorly lit, and perfect for my purposes. I found Darren's BMW in spot 247, gleaming under the fluorescent lights like a shrine to overcompensation. The license plate read, Secon 1, Security Consultant Number 1. The arrogance was breathtaking. I didn't touch the car, didn't need to. I just needed to understand the layout for later use. The real prize was the building's security system. Like most luxury buildings, the Meridian relied more on appearance than actual security. The cameras were obvious, the guards were bored, and the resident access codes hadn't been changed in months. I spent an hour walking the building, memorizing exits, service elevators, and blind spots. If this escalated, and it would, I wanted every advantage. My phone rang as I walked back to my truck. Gloria's number. Nick, dear, you need to know something. That wife of yours had 3 men over again today. They carried boxes out of your house. My blood went cold. What kind of boxes? Moving boxes. And they were heavy. Took 2 men to carry some of them. I drove home faster than I should have, my mind racing. What could they be stealing? My tools were still in the workshop. My tools were locked in the safe. My important papers were in a safety deposit box. Then it hit me. The basement storage room where I kept my military memorabilia, old electronics, and the cash I'd been saving for a new helicopter. The storage room door was open. The boxes that had contained my emergency fund, nearly $40,000 in cash, were gone. Faye was sitting in the living room when I came upstairs, reading a magazine like nothing had happened. Hey, honey, how was your day? I sat down across from her, studying her face. She was good. I had to give her that. No tells, no nervous energy, just the picture of innocent domesticity. Interesting. Ran into some new people at the festival. A guy named Darren Moss. Her face didn't change, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. Never heard of him. Really? That's weird because he seemed to know quite a bit about me. About us. Probably saw you on TV with the councilman. I nodded thoughtfully. Probably. Hey, have you been in the basement storage room lately? No. Why would I be? Just wondering. Some of my old army stuff seems to be missing. Now she looked concerned, or at least she performed concern well. Missing? Should we call the police? I don't think that'll be necessary. I have a feeling it'll turn up. That night, I didn't bother watching the camera feeds. Instead, I made phone calls. The first was to my bank, reporting suspicious activity on our joint accounts. The second was to Councilman Baird's chief of staff. Jim, it's Nick Harlan. I need to talk to you about a potential security issue. What kind of issue? The kind that involves blackmail, fraud, and people with access to sensitive information about the councilman's schedule. There was a long pause. Can you be in my office tomorrow morning? I'll be there. The third call was to my lawyer, an old army buddy named Pete Kowalski, who specialized in divorce and asset protection. Pete, I need to move fast on something. How quickly can we freeze joint assets and file for divorce? If you have evidence of financial malfeasance, 48 hours. I'll have everything you need by tomorrow night. I hung up and looked at the empty storage room one more time. $40,000 was a lot of money, but it was about to buy me something much more valuable: justice. Councilman Baird's office was in the old City Hall building, all marble and mahogany and the kind of gravitas that made people speak in whispers. Jim Kowalski, no relation to my lawyer, was Baird's chief of staff and the kind of political operative who could end careers with a phone call. Tell me about the security issue, Nick. I laid out everything: the affair, the theft, Darren's background, and most importantly, Faye's access to information about Baird's travel schedule and security arrangements. She's been photographing documents? Jim's face had gone pale. I don't have proof of that yet, but she's had unrestricted access to my briefcase, my phone, and my notes for months. And now she's involved with a man who specializes in selling sensitive information. Jim was already reaching for his phone. We need to assume everything has been compromised. I'm calling an emergency security review. There's more. I think they are planning to set me up for something. The theft of my cash was too bold, too risky. They're either desperate or they think they have an insurance policy. What kind of insurance policy? The kind that involves framing the guy with access to helicopters and government officials. Jim's face went from pale to gray. Jesus Christ, what do you need from us? Cut Faye out of everything immediately. Change all protocols, codes, and schedules. And when this goes public, and it will, I need the councilman to remember that I came to you first. Done. What's your next move? I'm going to give them enough rope to hang themselves. I left City Hall with a recording of our conversation and Jim's promise of full cooperation. Phase 2 was about to begin. The Riverside Hotel was a dump, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions, but it had one advantage. It was directly across from Darren's building, with a perfect view of the parking garage entrance. I checked in under a false name, paid cash, and set up surveillance equipment in the window. Then I made a call to Darren's number. We need to talk. Nick Harlan. I was wondering when you'd call. Tonight, Riverside Hotel, room 237. Come alone. I don't think so. That sounds like a trap. It is, but you'll come anyway because you're curious about what I know and you think you can handle one helicopter pilot. There was a long pause. What time? 9 o'clock. And Darren, bring my money. I hung up and called Marty. I need backup tonight. Nothing dangerous, just witness duty. What are we witnessing? The end of my marriage and the beginning of their legal problems. At 8:45, I watched Darren's BMW pull out of the garage, followed by a black SUV that had to be Marco. They were coming, but not alone. Perfect. I met them in the hotel lobby, which smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Darren had dressed for intimidation. Black suit, gold chains, the kind of outfit that screamed, "I watch too many gangster movies." Marco lurked by the door, trying to look menacing. Nice place, Darren said, looking around with disgust. It suits the occasion. Shall we go upstairs? Room 237 was exactly what you'd expect. Stained carpet, flickering lights, and the kind of atmosphere that made everyone want to finish their business quickly. So, Darren said, settling into the room's single chair like he owned it. What's this about? It's about $40,000, a cheating wife, and a con man who's about to learn why you don't mess with military veterans. Darren laughed. Military veterans? You fly a helicopter for a living, not storm beaches. You're right. I just transport people. But the skills transfer. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of his BMW in the parking garage. Nice car. Expensive. Must be hard to make the payments on a security consultant's salary. His smile faltered. What's your point? My point is that I know exactly who you are, what you do, and how you make your money. I also know you're in debt to some very unpleasant people, and my wife's $40,000 isn't going to solve your problems. Marco shifted nervously by the door. These weren't the kind of guys who were used to being on the defensive. You don't know anything. I know you've been using my house as your personal playground. I know you've been stealing from me, and I know you're planning to frame me for something big enough to justify all this risk. I pulled out a manila folder and spread photos across the bed, surveillance shots of them entering my house, bank records showing the timing of the theft, and screenshots of their text messages. I also know that, as of this morning, Councilman Baird's office considers you a security threat, which means every law enforcement agency in the state has your name and photo. Darren's face had gone from confident to worried. You're bluffing. Am I? Call Faye. Ask her how her meeting with the biotech company's HR department went today. I watched his face as he processed that information. Faye's career was over, which meant his access to inside information was gone. What do you want? I want my money back. I want you to stay away from my wife, soon to be ex-wife, and I want you to understand that if you try to retaliate, I will destroy you so completely that you'll be lucky to get a job cleaning toilets. Marco stepped forward. Maybe we should just... Should just what? I stood up, and for the first time, let them see the anger I'd been controlling for weeks. Should just threaten me. In a hotel room with security cameras across from a building where half the city council lives after I've already reported you to law enforcement? I walked to the window and pointed at Darren's car. Should just risk everything on a play against a guy who flies helicopters for a living and knows exactly how to make people disappear? It was a bluff. I'd never hurt anyone outside of combat, but they didn't know that. Darren was sweating now. Look, maybe we can work something out. We already are. You're going to transfer $40,000 to this account. I handed him a slip of paper. And then you're going to disappear from my life. Permanently. And if we don't, I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Then, tomorrow morning, every news outlet in the city gets a very interesting story about a con man, a cheating wife, and a security breach that compromised a city councilman's safety, along with photos, videos, and financial records. Darren looked at Marco, who shrugged helplessly. They were knocking and they knew it. Fine, but this isn't over. Yes, it is. Because if I see you again, if I hear you've been talking about me, if you so much as drive past my house, I will end you, not physically, legally. I'll bury you in lawsuits, criminal charges, and public humiliation until you wish you'd never heard my name. They left without another word. I watched from the window as they drove away, then called Marty. Phase 3 complete. How's our other project coming? Faye's car hasn't moved from Darren's building in 6 hours. I think she's planning to spend the night. Perfect. Tomorrow's going to be very interesting. The divorce papers were served at 6 a.m., along with restraining orders and asset freezes that left Faye with nothing but the clothes she was wearing. Pete Kowalski had worked through the night, and the legal documents were works of art, comprehensive, devastating, and absolutely airtight. I watched from my workshop as the process server knocked on Darren's door. Faye answered in a bathrobe, her face cycling through confusion, shock, and rage as she read the papers. My phone rang 30 seconds later. Nick, what the hell is this? It's called consequences, Faye. You stole from me, cheated on me, and tried to compromise national security. Did you really think I'd just let it slide? You can't do this. Half of everything is mine. Actually, nothing is yours. Turns out that when you steal money and commit infidelity, you forfeit your claim to marital assets. Pete explained it all in the papers. She was crying now, but they were tears of rage, not remorse. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Oh, and Faye, you might want to check the news. I hung up and turned on the local morning show. The lead story was exactly what I'd promised. Security breach rocks City Hall. The reporter was standing outside Darren's building, explaining how a known con artist had gained access to sensitive government information through a relationship with a city contractor's wife. They didn't name names, yet, but everyone who mattered would know exactly who they were talking about. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you've won. This is just the beginning. I screenshotted it and forwarded it to Pete with a note. Evidence of maltreatment, add it to the file. The next text came from Darren's phone. Meet me at the old mill site. 1 hour. Come alone. I almost laughed. The old mill site was an abandoned industrial complex on the river, the kind of place where stupid people went to have dramatic confrontations. It was also completely isolated, with no witnesses and plenty of places to hide bodies, which made it perfect for my purposes. I called Marty. Remember that favor you owe me? The one where you covered for me when I crashed the training helicopter? Yeah, I remember. I'm calling it in. Meet me at the heliport in 20 minutes, and bring the camera equipment. The mill site looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. Rusted machinery, broken windows, and weeds growing through cracked concrete. Darren's BMW was parked near the main building, with the black SUV beside it. I landed the helicopter in the parking lot, the rotor wash kicking up clouds of dust and debris. Through the windscreen, I could see Darren and Marco covering their faces and stumbling backward. "Showtime," I told Marty through the headset. I shut down the engines and climbed out, walking toward them with the kind of casual confidence that comes from having air superiority. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the industrial wasteland and the reminder that I controlled the high ground. "Nice place for a meeting," I called out over the dying whine of the rotors. "Very dramatic. Very stupid." Darren had recovered his composure, but Marco looked nervous. This wasn't going according to whatever plan they'd hatched. "You've caused us a lot of problems, Nick." "I've solved a lot of problems. Fixed some security issues, cleaned up some corruption, removed some parasites from the ecosystem. Really, I should be getting a civic award." "You destroyed our lives." "No, I exposed your crimes. There's a difference." I stopped about 10 feet away, close enough to talk, but far enough to react if they tried anything stupid. "So what's the plan here, Darren? Knock me up? Eliminate me? Make me disappear?" "We just want to talk." "Then talk?" Darren looked at Marco, who nodded and pulled something from his jacket. Not a tool. A tablet computer. "We've got insurance," Darren said. "Videos of you installing surveillance equipment in your house without your wife's consent. Audio recordings of you threatening us. Evidence of stalking and maltreatment." He was bluffing, but it was a good bluff. If they'd been smart enough to gather counter-evidence, this could get complicated. "Show me." Marco held up the tablet, and I saw grainy footage of me installing cameras in my own home. The audio was garbled, but it was clearly me. "Interesting," I said. "Too bad it's completely worthless." "What?" "You filmed me installing security equipment in my own house. That's not illegal. The audio is too poor quality to be admissible in court, and even if it wasn't, all you've got is me protecting my property from thieves and adulterers." I pulled out my own phone and showed them the screen. "But this is good stuff. High-definition video of you two committing breaking and entering, theft, and conspiracy. Audio clear enough to pick up your social security numbers." Their faces fell as they realized they'd been outplayed from the beginning. "Plus," I continued, "I've got something you don't have." "What's that?" I pointed to the helicopter where Marty was clearly visible in the cockpit with a professional video camera. "A witness. Someone who's been recording this entire conversation and can testify that you lured me to an isolated location under false pretenses." Darren looked around desperately, finally understanding that he was trapped. "What do you want?" "I want you to get in your fancy car, drive out of this city, and never come back. I want you to forget my name, forget my wife's name, and forget you ever heard of this place. And if we don't?" I smiled and pulled out a flare tool I'd taken from the helicopter's emergency kit. "Then I signal Marty to call in the cavalry, state police, FBI, city council security, everyone who's been looking for an excuse to arrest you." I fired the flare into the air, where it burst in a shower of red sparks. The sound echoed off the abandoned buildings like a bang. That was just for dramatic effect, but the next one goes into your gas tank. Marco was already backing toward the SUV. "Come on, man, this is crazy. Let's just go." Darren held his ground for another moment, trying to salvage some dignity from the wreckage of his schemes. "This isn't over." "Yeah, it is." I fired another flare, this one landing just inches from his feet. "Run along, Darren, and remember, I know where you live, where you work, and who you owe money to. If I ever see you again, I'll make sure all your creditors know exactly where to find you." That did it. He turned and ran for the BMW, Marco right behind him. They peeled out of the parking lot like the devil was chasing them, leaving nothing but tire tracks and the smell of burned rubber. I walked back to the helicopter where Marty was grinning behind the camera. "Did you get all that?" "Every word. This is going to make a great documentary someday." "Not someday, today. I want copies sent to the police, the FBI, and every news outlet in the state, along with everything else we've collected." As we lifted off, I looked down at the abandoned mill site one last time. It was a fitting place for the end of this chapter, a monument to dead industries and failed dreams. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one more person who needed to face the consequences of their choices. Faye was waiting in what used to be our living room when I got home, surrounded by boxes and looking like a refugee from her own life. The divorce papers had done their work. She had 24 hours to remove her personal belongings, and then she was legally barred from the property. "I hope you're happy," she said without looking up. "Getting there." I sat down across from her, studying the woman I'd been married to for 6 years. She looked older somehow, diminished by the loss of her schemes and secrets. How's the job search going? You know damn well I can't get a job, not after what you did. What I did was tell the truth. You're the one who chose to steal, cheat, and commit espionage. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were full of hate. Espionage? Are you insane? You photographed classified documents. You passed information about government officials to a known criminal. In some states, that's treason. I never... Faye. I held up a hand to stop her. I have photos. I have videos. I have bank records, phone records, and testimony from multiple witnesses. The only reason you're not in federal prison right now is because I convinced them you were just a useful idiot. That hit home. Her face crumpled, and for the first time, she looked genuinely defeated. Why? I asked. Why throw away everything we had for a con man and his muscle-bound friend? She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Because I was bored. Because you were never home. Because Darren made me feel exciting. So you decided to destroy our marriage, steal my money, and betray my trust because you were bored? It wasn't supposed to go this far. It was just supposed to be fun. Fun! I let the word hang in the air between us. $40,000 and 6 years of marriage gone because you wanted to have fun. I'm sorry. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where we'd planned to raise children someday. The moving truck will be here in an hour. After that, if I see you on this property, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care. Call Darren. Call Marco. Call your mother. Just don't call me. She started crying then, real tears this time, not the manipulative performance she'd been putting on for months. But it was too late for tears. Nick, please, can't we work this out? Can't we try counseling or... Faye, I turned back to face her. You had strange men in our bed. You stole money I'd saved for 10 years. You tried to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. What exactly do you think counseling is going to fix? She didn't have an answer for that. The moving truck arrived exactly on schedule, driven by two guys who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I watched from the workshop as Faye supervised the loading of her belongings, clothes, books, jewelry, and the few pieces of furniture that had been hers before we married. Everything else stayed. The house, the cars, the bank accounts, the investments, all of it was mine now, protected by prenuptial agreements she'd signed without reading, and divorce laws she'd violated in every possible way. My phone rang as the truck pulled away. Pete Kowalski. It's done, he said. The divorce is final, the restraining orders are permanent, and the criminal referrals have been filed. She's officially not your problem anymore. What about Darren and Marco? Funny you should ask. They were arrested this morning trying to board a flight to Mexico. Turns out they had outstanding warrants in 3 states. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Outstanding warrants for what? Fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. The FBI had been tracking them for months, but they couldn't get enough evidence until you handed them a complete case file. So they're going to prison? For a very long time. Darren's looking at 15 to 20 years, Marco at 10 to 15. They'll be old men when they get out. I hung up and walked through my house now, taking inventory of what remained. It was quieter than it had been in months, peaceful in a way I'd forgotten was possible. The doorbell rang as I was making dinner. Gloria stood on the front porch with a casserole dish and a bottle of wine. "Thought you might be hungry," she said. "And I wanted to congratulate you on cleaning house." "Thanks, Gloria. You want to come in?" "Don't mind if I do." We ate dinner at my kitchen table while she filled me in on the neighborhood gossip. Apparently, the whole street had known about Faye's affair for months, but nobody had wanted to be the one to tell me. "We all liked you better anyway," Gloria said. "Faye was always too good for her own britches. Thought she was better than the rest of us." She probably was. Nonsense. Good people don't cheat on their spouses and steal from their families. You're well rid of her. After Gloria left, I sat on my back porch with a beer, watching the sun set over the river. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over." I screenshotted it, forwarded it to Pete and the FBI, and blocked the number. Then I deleted it from my mind. It was over. Faye was gone, Darren and Marco were in prison, and I was free to rebuild my life on my own terms. I raised my beer to the sunset. Here's to new beginnings. The helicopter business was booming. Word had gotten out about my role in exposing the security breach. and suddenly every government contractor in the state wanted to hire the pilot who'd caught the spies. I had more work than I could handle, and enough money to finally buy that new helicopter I'd been dreaming about. 6 months later, I was flying over the city when I spotted a familiar figure on the street below. Faye, looking tired and worn, carrying grocery bags toward a rundown apartment building on the wrong side of town. I could have landed, could have tried to talk to her, could have offered help or forgiveness or closure. Instead, I banked left and flew toward the sunset, leaving the past where it belonged.